In the heart of Arizona, billionaire businessman David Harper returned to his sprawling estate, the grandeur of the property feeling hollow and distant. The realization of his wife's departure had hit him like a storm, leaving behind a void that neither gold nor opulence could fill. Every hallway echoed with memories of laughter now gone, and the expensive furnishings seemed to mock him with their silence. For years, he had chased success, wealth, and prestige, but the emptiness in his personal life now overshadowed every achievement. The walls of his mansion, once a symbol of triumph, now felt like a gilded cage. 4 days later, David found himself behind the wheel of his sleek black SUV, leaving the city and its constant noise far behind. The desert stretched endlessly, a vast expanse of sand, rocks, and open sky, the horizon melting into shades of amber and burnt orange under the setting sun. The wind carried the faint scent of sagebrush and dust, a strange comfort to someone desperate for clarity. He drove without a destination, letting the rhythmic motion of the tires over the asphalt soothe his restless mind. There were no calls, no emails, no reminders of the life he had left behind, just the lonely hum of the engine and the desert stretching endlessly around him. As twilight deepened, David spotted movement near an old, crumbling barn tucked beside a rusted fence. Something small, fragile, darted out from the shadows, and instinctively he slammed the brakes. Heart racing, he watched as a tiny figure emerged from the darkness, a barefoot Apache girl, trembling with fear. Her thin arms clutched a carved wooden eagle to her chest, and dirt smeared her small, delicate face. Her wide eyes, full of terror and uncertainty, met his, and for a moment, time seemed to pause. The desert, the highway, and the isolation around them faded into the background. "Mama," she whispered, her voice barely audible, a single word loaded with desperation and sorrow. David's heart constricted. He had no idea where she had come from or what horrors she might have faced, yet he felt an undeniable pull to protect her. He opened the door, stepped out, and approached slowly, making sure not to startle her further. Every movement was gentle, deliberate. Reaching his jacket to her, he wrapped her small frame carefully, feeling her shiver against him. He offered water from a bottle he kept in the car, and she accepted it cautiously, sipping as though it might vanish if she drank too quickly. The girl's hands trembled around the wooden eagle, her knuckles white with the force of her grip. David crouched down to meet her gaze, speaking softly, "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe now. I won't let anyone hurt you." She didn't respond, only stared, her lips quivering as tears welled in her eyes. Her silence spoke volumes. She had learned to trust no one. Yet in his presence, a fragile thread of hope seemed to emerge, a tiny spark that had survived whatever darkness had forced her to the desert. Driving away from the barn, David kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other resting lightly on her back. He tried to imagine her story, piecing together the clues, the dirt and scratches on her legs, the desperation in her eyes, the single word that had slipped from her lips. Each detail painted a picture of suffering and survival, of a child too young to endure so much alone. And yet, despite it all, she had found him, a stranger, a man broken in his own way, yet willing to open his heart without hesitation. Hours passed as the sun dipped below the horizon, turning the sky into a canvas of deep purples and fiery reds. They arrived at a small, secluded cabin David owned on the edge of the desert, a place he often used to escape the chaos of his own life. He led her inside, offering her food he had packed earlier, simple yet nourishing. She ate hesitantly at first, glancing at him with suspicion, but hunger quickly overcame caution. David watched her quietly, feeling a strange sense of purpose returning. He had lost so much, but here, in this unexpected encounter, he discovered a reason to care again, to connect, to protect, and perhaps to heal himself in the process. Night fell, and the desert wind whispered outside the cabin. The girl slept in a small cot, still clutching her wooden eagle, and David sat nearby, staring out at the stars. He thought about the fragility of life, the sudden ways it could change, and the quiet miracles that could appear even in the midst of heartbreak. 4 days after losing the only woman he had loved, he had found something far more profound: the power of compassion, the unexpected arrival of responsibility, and the chance to rewrite his own story through the eyes of a child who had nowhere else to turn. Just days after taking the little Apache girl under his care, David Harper thought he had found a rhythm in his otherwise quiet and empty estate. The girl, who now moved with a cautious sense of comfort, followed him through the halls, her small hands brushing against his as she explored this strange new world. He watched her closely, noting every nervous glance and tentative step. He realized that despite his wealth and privilege, it was the presence of this fragile child that filled the emptiness that money never could. For the first time in years, he felt responsible for someone's happiness, and the weight of that responsibility was strangely comforting. That evening, as the desert sun dipped below the horizon and shadows stretched across the manicured lawns, a sudden, sharp knock echoed through the grand halls. The sound startled both of them. The girl froze, her small frame rigid against his leg, and David's instincts immediately went on high alert. He hadn't expected anyone to know about her or find their secluded home so quickly. Cautiously, he approached the door, signaling the girl to stay close. Outside, 3 women stood, their presence commanding yet tense. Their traditional Apache clothing, woven with patterns that seemed to tell stories of generations past, contrasted sharply with the modern estate behind them. The women's eyes, a mixture of relief, concern, and quiet authority, scanned the child at David's side. The little girl clung to him instinctively, her tiny hands gripping the fabric of his jacket. David took a deep breath, sensing the gravity of the moment. These women were not strangers, they were family, or perhaps guardians of a culture and community he barely understood. Yet in their gaze, there was no anger, only the anxious hope that their child had been found safe. The tension in the air was palpable, a quiet battle between fear and trust. "I'm David Harper," he said softly, keeping his voice calm and steady. "She's safe here. I found her wandering alone in the desert. I didn't know where else to take her." His words seemed to hang in the air, fragile yet sincere. One of the women stepped forward, her eyes softening as she took in the sight of the girl, healthy and fed, no longer shivering or frightened. She's been missing," the woman said, her voice trembling slightly, carrying the weight of days spent in fear and uncertainty. "We tracked her here. We feared," her voice broke, but the relief in her gaze said more than words ever could. David invited them inside, offering tea and a quiet space to sit. The child remained close to him, peeking occasionally at the women who had come so far to find her. Conversation was slow at first, careful, as David listened to the women recount the story of their daughters' disappearance, of the fear that had kept them awake, and the relief now flooding their hearts. The girl's lips curled into the tiniest of smiles, realizing she was surrounded by people who had only wanted her safe return. David watched silently, understanding that this encounter was not just a reunion but a bridging of worlds, his lonely, high-tech existence and the rich, resilient traditions of the Apache people. Over the hours that followed, stories were exchanged. The women spoke of the girl's family, of the struggles and histories that shaped their community. David shared fragments of his own life, careful to admit his loneliness and the void left by a marriage that had ended abruptly. There was no judgment, only the quiet recognition of human vulnerability, the acknowledgement that loss and hope often coexist. The little girl, now nestled between David and one of the women, looked up at him and smiled with trust, the kind of smile that could melt even the hardest heart. By nightfall, the tension that had filled the air earlier had transformed into a fragile peace. David realized that life's most profound connections often appear when least expected. In the span of a few days, he had gone from a man drowning in wealth and sorrow to someone entrusted with the safety of a child and the trust of her people. The encounter had changed him, reshaping his understanding of family, responsibility, and the unexpected ways healing can occur. In protecting her, he had found a sense of purpose and connection that wealth had never provided, proving that even in loss, life could deliver moments of unimaginable grace. As the women prepared to take the child back to her community, David knelt to look into her eyes. "You'll always have a place here if you need it," he said. She nodded, her small hand pressing briefly against his before slipping away with her guardians. Standing on the porch, watching the silhouettes disappear into the desert night, David felt something shift inside him. A chapter of loneliness had ended, replaced by one of hope, connection, and the quiet realization that the heart's capacity for compassion and love was far greater than he had ever imagined.